I had seen the cover a billion times. I had seen the ebook version of it on my Kindle. I felt like I already knew it inside and out. But then when I got that package, and if those of you who had seen my Instagram story knew I needed a moment after I'd unwrapped it, because it, for the first time, felt like a real thing. Yeah. And that was a really cool feeling to be like, oh my gosh, this is something that I've created, and like here it is. It's like, it's real, and that's awesome. So,
did you hold it up and give it a sniff and flick through it? And
I don't think I sniffed it.
Okay, that's just
Does
me.
it actually smell?
Smells of fresh, beautiful paper.
It does smell of paper.
Yeah,
Okay, so smell your book when you get it. Sorry for you ebook users. You're not. I mean, if you want to smell your Kindle, you can, but it's not the same. Just saying. Don't remember sniffing it, but I do remember flicking through it and just looking at the pages and looking at the titles of the chapters and going, oh, that's me. I wrote that. I decided on that title for that chapter and those subheadings and that story, and I just picked random spots and just started to read little bits and pieces, even though I'd read it a billion times by that point. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's an exciting moment. It's really great when you see it. So you're an author. Can you believe it?
No, not at all.
Some of us might have thought of you as Neri the businesswoman, Neri the entrepreneur, but Neri the author. When did you first think of yourself as an author?
Well, I still don't think of myself as an author, even though I have something that kind of says otherwise. But I do consider myself a storyteller, and I've been a storyteller since I was a kid. I've always been writing. I used to write poems and little plays, and I was part of like any and every production at my primary school and into high school, and I studied acting at uni. So that storytelling part has been so strong within me throughout my whole life. So writing isn't new to me. Writing is like an old friend. Writing a book and trying to structure that into being something was challenging. I think that was what was new about it all.
Yeah, but you do love a problem.
I do love a problem. Yes.
You solve it really well.
Yes.
What about this book in particular? Where did this come from? What were the origins of this?
My life was the origins of it. I didn't want to write this book. It kind of, it was one night at Hillsong, as all things start with Hillsong. I was at conference. I had gone because my friend was unwell, and she had given me her ticket to go, and I didn't go with any sort of expectations. I wasn't like out to get a word from God or to like have this encounter. I was just like, I'd actually got back from the States the day before, and I was mainly interested in not falling asleep and just keeping myself awake. So that's why I went along. And then I remember in worship, I was praying the dangerous prayer of like, God, use me however you want to use me, whatever that looks like I'll do it. And I just felt within my spirit, the Holy Spirit say, write the book. And I was like, what book? And he's like, you know what book? And I'm like, I don't want to write a book on singleness. I don't know why I knew it was that. I just knew that that's what it was about. And so I kind of wrestled with it for a couple of days and then thought, oh, well, why don't I give this a shot and see where this goes? And here we are. So,
lucky us.
Yeah. Lucky you.
What was the most unexpected part of the process? We often think about authors, squirreled away in a room and typing away and, surrounded by books, and then you put it together and then you send it off. But what was it like for you? What was the unexpectedness of it?
I think the unexpected part of it all was probably the editing process. Because it's like I kind of knew I would have to create this book and then it would have to go through an editing process, but I didn't really know what that looked like or what that meant. And I was so lucky to be connected to Gina through you, who was amazing in kind of guiding me through that process and helping me figure out what this whole editing thing was and how to do it. And I thought that when I handed the manuscript over, kind of like I would get it back and then do one read through and it would be done, but it took months and back and forth and lots of digging in again and rereading and checking and sending it back and then getting edits and going back and forth and back and forth. So I think that process was, because I didn't know what to expect, I was a bit surprised.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And was it a little bit painful? Did it hurt a little bit?
A little bit,
Yeah.
not too bad. It was.
Thank
it
you,
was,
Gina.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. Amazing, Gina. It wasn't too bad. It was, I think, more towards the end when she'd given me the 2/3 of the book that she'd just edited. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, I'm just going to dig in. And luckily, I'd planned a writing retreat with some friends, so we'd gone away for a few days. And I just went, right, my goal for this writing retreat is to make it through the last 2/3 of the edits of this book. I'm not leaving till that's done. And I got there, which was amazing. But yeah, there were moments of like, Gina's like writing things going, this is great, but I want more from you. And I'm like, there's nothing more to give, Gina. Oh, gosh, just take what I've written. And once I'd had that moment, then I'd be like, okay, well, here's the more that you asked for. So those moments, yeah, there was a few of those.
Yeah, it's like an athlete, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to reach peak performance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a good editor draws it out of you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Now, confession, I'm married. But so, should I be here? Well, part of the reason I'm so committed to this project is that in your book, you write some of the really dumb things that married people have said to you. And I realised that I've either said or thought every single one. And I realised I need to read this book to know how wrong I've been in some of my assumptions or some of my ideas. But I'm interested in, now that you've actually got this book, you're telling people that you've written this book on singleness, what are some of the dumb things people are saying to you right now?
Right now?
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily that people are saying dumb things, it's the look I get. So I'll say, oh, I'm an author. They're like, oh, you've written a book? Yeah, I've written a book. And what's it about? And I'm like, singleness. And they're like, okay. I don't really know how to respond to that. And I think that's been the most interesting thing. I haven't really had any, maybe the one, maybe not funny but stupid thing. It was funny. The other week at the pub, I was at trivia and we were asked, like, what's the most exciting thing, for extra points, I should say, it was for 5 bonus points, what exciting thing do you have coming up in the next few weeks? And my friends were like, Neri, your book launch. So I shot my hand up and the quizmaster's like, yeah, you. And I was like, I'm releasing my first book. And he's like, cool, what's it about? And I'm like, singleness? And he's like, are you an expert on that? And I was like, yes. It was so awkward. We got the 5 extra bonus points, and I think we won the night because of it. So it paid off.
It's worth it.
But it was this moment of like, oh, I didn't realise I'd have to tell you what it was about to the pub. Everyone in the pub. I wrote a book about singleness, and apparently I'm an expert.
Yay.
So, yeah.
I think in this book, what really struck me is how vulnerable you get in this book. You talk at length about your dates, and you've had some doozies. What is the cost of getting it down on paper, and now knowing everyone's going to read that? What is the cost of that level of vulnerability?
I'm not going to lie, I've had a few sleepless nights about how much I've shared in this book and some of the things I've shared in this book. But I'm a big believer in honesty and authenticity, and I didn't want to write something that was kind of sugar-coated or that you kind of got the gist of something. I wanted to write it so that I could share, like, just really how that moment made me feel and what I was experiencing. And I think that that's the power of story. It creates connection, and I think that people will read these stories and they will find their own moments of like awkward dates or awkward experiences or very painful, deeply painful experiences that they've gone through in these stories, and be able then to connect with what I'm sharing and the lessons that I learned from those experiences. So yeah, I've had moments. Don't judge me too harshly, guys. Yeah, but I've done some stupid stuff, which is very obvious in this book. And I've had some very real moments that I want to share because I think that it's important. It's important to be authentic and real particularly around this topic, that can often have quite a stigma of shame around it. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, would you be willing to share one of those
Yes.
vulnerable moments?
Why? Oh, I never thought you'd ask, Cara. Well, I'm going to share a moment that's more of a humorous one, but gives you a taste of kind of like how ridiculous I am at times and what it's like in my head. So, and if people recognise the people in this story, I've changed names of all the stories in my book to protect the people, and there's a disclaimer there, you can read that in length in the book. But if you recognise the story, people don't write in the chat who's who in the story. Okay. When I was 17, I met Blake. He went to my church and was an actor with a gorgeous smile and blue eyes. Being both a budding thespian and a hopeless romantic already, I was pretty sure I'd found the guy who, at the tender age of 17, would finally get me. We were passionate about the same things, so we were sure to connect deeply. And to some extent we did. The banter was strong and fun, and I quickly confided in my best friend at the time, Sarah, that I liked Blake. We were both in a church youth drama group. Every year at the youth camp, the drama team would perform short skits in line with the camp theme. The year 11 and 12 students would always get the main roles, and 2001 was my year. Opting to do something a bit different that year, we based the skits on the teen TV dramas that were popular at the time. The play was called 2154 Castle Creek High, and I scored the career-defining role of Taylor, the 17-year-old good Christian girl who had a boyfriend played by, you guessed it, Blake. It was my perfect role, performing across from my perfect man. By this stage, my crush on Blake was bordering on full-blown devotion, but I couldn't tell if Blake liked me. It just wasn't clear, and I felt I had waited long enough. I needed to know if ours was a romance of epic proportions. I wouldn't classify myself as a manipulative person, but if I really want something, I can be driven enough to do whatever to get it. And I wanted to know how Blake felt. One day, a thought dropped into my head. The previous year, the drama team had performed a similar play where two of the main characters had kissed. In typical teen style, the audience had whistled and whooped at the sight of these two teenagers who were actually dating in real life, kissing on stage. Given Blake and I were playing characters who were dating, then to really make it believable to the audience, we would probably have to kiss at some point. I mean, it made sense and would really enhance the credibility and believability of our onstage relationship. The level of commitment I had for my craft was an all-time high, or maybe it was my level of commitment to my crush. If you had asked me at the time, I would have sworn till I was blue in the face that it was for the good of the play and there was no ulterior motive. I plucked up the courage and floated the idea with Blake. To my absolute surprise, he said yes. I was dumbfounded that it had worked. I mean, that he was just as committed to the craft as I was, #OscarBound. I was also ecstatic because, to my mind, this confirmed things. He obviously liked me in some way. Why else would he agree to do it? I couldn't believe my luck. Much as I would have liked to, we didn't rehearse the kiss, instead planning to do it on the morning of the performance to keep things fresh. It wouldn't be a full-blown kiss, just a peck on the lips at the end of the scene. The first day of camp rolled around and my sense of anticipation was palpable. This was it. Blake and I were going to have our chaste little peck. He was going to realise he was in love with me, and we were going to end up together in perfect bliss on and off the stage. The scene was going perfectly, with not a single line missed or cue forgotten. Then the moment arrived. I casually threw my line, something profound like, "See you after school," and leaned in for my life-changing on-stage blow-your-mind kiss. And just like that, it was over. The crowd whistled and whooped, of course, and someone yelled out, "Get a room," so appropriate for a Christian camp. But none of it mattered. The crowd disappeared as I stared into Blake's eyes. I knew it. This confirmed it. Blake now felt what I felt. I was sure of it. Don't underestimate the power of an onstage pet kiss. The rest of the day, I was asked by so many people if that was the plan. Of course, I would reply. We thought it was an important part to the story. I know, I'm ridiculous. I relished the attention, and inside I was floating on air because I was sure Blake felt the same. Never mind that the whole day Blake didn't really make any attempt to talk to me. I was certain he was just biding his time until we could be alone. Later that evening, I would come to discover that Blake did, in fact, have a crush, just not on me. Turns out he'd fallen for my friend Sarah, My grand plan to ignite a romance of blockbuster proportions had not worked at all, and worse still, my leading man had fallen for the supporting actress. This was a box office flop. I was devastated. As with all things, time passed, my feelings changed, and despite his best efforts to pursue her, Blake and Sarah never dated. She just wasn't interested in him like that. That's how ridiculous I am.
It is.
But I thought that would work.
You do overthink things,
I
can
do
I just say?
Yeah.
I'm just amazed how much of yourself you do leave on these pages. But that's not the only thing. It's not just the stories, but I think the stories are really important, as you say, so people can understand. And to peel back the layers, you mentioned before things like stigma and some shame. But what really resounds in this book is the positivity of being single. And I just loved what you had to say about that. There's an ancient Christian tradition about talking about consolations, which are the joys and the gifts from God that he gives us. And I guess having written this book and some of the things you explore in here, what are some of the consolations of singleness?
I can sleep diagonally in my bed. I don't have to get up with a child's foot in my face. I can sleep in. I can stay up late. I can do the things that I love to do. I think so often we kind of get focused on what we don't have and what we're not experiencing, that we lose the connection to what we have in this moment and what we are experiencing. So, one of my favourite things to do is to go down to the beach, and I can do that at any time, at any moment that I feel like I want to. I don't have to check with anyone. I don't have to make sure anyone's, been changed, sleep, fed, or anything like that. I can just go and do as I please. And I think that it's those moments that we need to get really good at cherishing and seeing what they are, which is this beautiful part of being single, and not wish them away and not will them away and not hurry through them, but to embrace them, because the plan, the hope, is that you won't have that time back again. So make the most of it, because you do have it right now.
I also feel like in this book you see singleness as something that's been deeply formational for you, forming you as a Christian. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those things too?
Yeah, I think that it was when I entered my 30s and I was very single at that point that I kind of went, maybe I should figure out why I'm still single in my 30s. Because I had in my head, I had the grand plan of being married at 22, was going to have 4 kids, was going to start my career at 30. Like, I had it all kind of mapped out in my head, and it didn't happen that way. And I got to 30 and I was like, okay, God, well, if I'm single in my 30s, which I do distinctly remember saying to God, like maybe when I was 16 or something, that being single in my 30 would be a fate worse than death. Like that. I remember saying that to him because I believed it. I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't be single in 30s. Oh my gosh. And here we are. So it's not a fate worse than death. I can testify to that. Awesome. Absolutely. But it certainly was a moment of like, well, then why? Why am I single? What do you have for me here? It was this question around like, what do you have for me here in this singleness? And so I've spent the last few years just really seeking God in that and trying to understand what about this matters. Why am I on this journey? What in myself needs to grow and change? But what about the season of singleness itself do I need to learn to embrace and love? And what's great about it? And so this book has really been the accumulation of that experience, particularly the last kind of 6 years of that. And just, wanting to be like, I don't want to hate this. I don't want to hate my life. I don't want to hate something in my life. So how can I learn to love it and embrace it and see all the good that exists within it? So
I think you do it beautifully, and it's very profound. So
thank you.
Do you have another excerpt from us along those lines?
I do. This one is not as story-driven, but I think it's an important, if I can find it. I think it's, here it is. I think it's, to me, this is one of the core lessons of singleness. So it's Chapter 11, how much is it worth? My friend and I were at a bar recently, and as is generally the case with my single friends, we got onto the topic of relationships. And I asked her if she was seeing anyone, and she replied no. She said something that caught my attention big time. She said that what mattered most to her was character. The person she ended up with would have to have a great character, she said, because she was going to be sacrificing a lot for them. A slightly perplexed look rolled across my face as I pondered her words for a moment. I realised very quickly that she was right, and I loved how she had put it. My friend has a great perspective on singleness. She truly values, treasures, and protects her singleness. If she's going to let this valuable part of herself go and become one with another person, then that person better be worth the sacrifice. I found this view so deeply refreshing because it placed the value on what I believe is the right place, on the self. It is valuing your singleness enough to not wish it away as quickly as possible. It is being whole just as you are and not seeking wholeness from someone else. This beautiful perspective is one that so many of us could do with adopting. If I'm going to sacrifice my single self to be in a relationship, then the person I'm doing that for better be worth it because I will be giving up a lot to do so. If we can balance the scales a little more towards a positive outlook on singleness, to truly value what we have, I think we would all come to embrace and enjoy singleness a little more. But single does not need to mean pity-filled looks, lonely nights on the couch, or feeling locked out of some elite club. Single can mean so much more if we choose to add value to it. We ascribe value to inanimate objects all the time. I have a giving key, an old brass key on a brass chain that has the word raw engraved on it. Doesn't sound like much, right? For me, this key serves as a daily reminder that I have a voice and a message that needs to be heard. It reminds me of one of my life verses. Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. Proverbs 31, 8-9. But it's just an old key. It holds no real value but for the value I ascribe it. So when people ask me why I wear a key as a necklace, often followed by, is that the key to your house or is that the key to your heart? Neither are correct. I don't try to pitch that it's a beautiful piece of jewellery. I tell them that it has great meaning to me and serves as a daily reminder of my calling and purpose. What if we could change the value we ascribe to singleness? What if instead of ascribing a low value to it, we ascribed great value to it? What if instead of resenting this status that is part of who we are in this moment, we began speaking of it as a precious commodity, a time that is of great value, a season not to be rushed but to be relished, a time that should not be cast aside for just anyone or anything. It's as simple as changing the way we talk. Instead of saying there are no good single Christian guys or girls out there, what if we tried, there are so many great Christian single guys and girls out there and I can't wait to meet them. Shifts in the language we use change the way we see the situation. I believe change is possible. I believe it's possible for the church to change its dialogue around marriage and singleness. I believe it's possible for our friends and family to change the way they view us, to change the way they engage with us. But I also believe change starts with me.
Wow, that's great. I'm partly tempted just to get you to read the whole book. We'll just wait here, I think. It's beautifully read, but it's beautifully written as well.
Thank you.
So what does it feel like to be here at your very own launch?
It's a bit surreal because there's a lot of empty seats. Got 2 people down front and a couple other people around, but I had envisaged this beautiful launch with a giant cheese platter and, book signings and all that fun stuff. And then COVID ruined everything. But I think I'm still really grateful to be here. And I'm really grateful to everyone who has called in tonight to support me in this journey. And I love that I'm at this point. I love that this is the beginning of things, that I'm just getting started with all my books. I literally have another one coming out in early 2021, and many others after that are in the works at the moment. So like this moment right now feels like a shift. It feels like there's a change, like there's a bit of a direction shift for me. Almost to some extent like I have discovered an old friend. something about myself that I already knew was there and had engaged with it in one way, but this is a new way. And so it feels old and yet new. And I'm excited to see where things go and excited to keep writing and keep creating these books because I just love it so much.
Start of a brilliant career. We're all in on it. Now it's your chance to give us some questions. If you have questions that you've wanted to ask Neri, this is the chance to do it. I might kick off though with one other question. Tell us about your writing process. What is your concept, your habit of writing? How do you do it? Are you so effective and productive?
Right. Because I'm single, I don't have to deal with anyone else in the morning. So I actually find myself, I'm most creative in the morning. So usually I will wake up around 5:30, 6 o'clock. I will go get my coffee. I will come back to bed. I'll have a few moments with Jesus and just kind of check in for the day. And then I'll grab my laptop and I try to write for somewhere between an hour to 2 hours, depending on whether or not it's a work from home day. Or have to go into the office. So definitely in the morning I write, but sometimes the inspiration strikes at night and I can be typing away till quite late in the evening. The weekends, if it's a rainy weekend, then I'll just go, well, I'm bored, I don't want to watch TV, so I'll just get lost in my imagination. It's pretty fun, so let's go there. So that's kind of like the times that I write, and I try to be consistent in keeping that because a writing habit is really what writes a book. A lot of people start and then they don't finish because they don't have a habit of just pushing through and just writing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, even if it's just like 100 words that day, just writing. So I built that up quite quickly, thankfully, because of COVID as well. Like, we were all at home, so it was easy to just be like, well, I can't go out and do anything. I'll write something. So that has certainly helped. That's where COVID's been handy this year. And the other way I have learnt, so I've certainly learnt about myself as a writer and how I write. They have this terminology where you're either a pantser or a plotter. And a pantser is where you write by the seat of your pants. So you just like typing away and whatever's flowing is whatever you're writing. And a plotter is someone who will like map the story out and be very detailed, and then they'll write based off that kind of very detailed map. I thought I was a pantser. I'm a plotter.
You are a plotter.
Big time a plotter. And that has been so helpful. And I think that's also partly why I've been able to write these. So my next round of books are Christian fiction books. And I've written a novel and two novels, working on a third. And the reason I've been able to produce them so quickly is because I plot it out and I go, right, what's the story? This is all. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I follow that exactly, because inspiration does strike and I go with the flow in that respect. But a lot of it is that I've actually mapped the story out and I just write according to my map.
You make me think of Matt Damon in The Martian. Like, just put science to work. You research, you explore, you figure it out, you know everything that's going on around it, but it also, you have all these ways of connecting in with what you want to draw out.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I haven't got any questions. Are there any questions coming through? Oh.
Ouch, guys. No, just kidding. That's fine.
Do you guys have any questions?
No, don't put them on the spot. You guys have...
Okay, what are some of the funny things married people say?
How about I share a little bit of that chapter with you?
Awesome.
Okay. So just so you know, there's a chapter here for married people. This book is not just for single people, it is for married people. And I intentionally wrote a chapter for married people so that I could help you guys engage with single people in a way that's really supportive and helpful. I've written you a letter. Know that it comes from a place of absolute love and grace and just wanting to help. But yeah, there's a chapter titled "Not Everything Given to You is Useful for You," and that's aimed at my married friends. So some of the things some of the unhelpful questions. Why are you single? If I knew why, I wouldn't be single now, would I? Are you putting yourself out there enough? If I put myself out there anymore, you'll be asking me if I've backslidden. Do you think that maybe you're too independent, so I should sit at home and wait for someone to call? Do you think that maybe you're too strong, so I shouldn't have an opinion and use the mind the good Lord gave me? Have you prayed about it? Only every moment of every day of my life. How about you? What's wrong with people? You're amazing. Thanks, but yet another question I can't answer and can't do anything about. Unhelpful comments or advice. Maybe you just need to let guys know you need them. So be weak and needy then. Don't be weak and needy. Wait, what? When you stop looking, he'll just appear. Shuts eyes. Is he here yet? Don't be too picky. You're not getting any younger. Thanks. I'd forgotten about the biological clock that ticks and gongs incessantly every time a friend announces they're expecting. God is just preparing you. You're still a work in progress. I didn't realize I needed to make it to a certain level or state of humanity before we were suitable for marriage. Don't be so obvious about your feelings, but I'm meant to at least show my interest, right? Wait 3 days before you text, right? So be unavailable. Respond straight away so they know you're keen. Hang on, wait, be more available? The guy should always pursue, but what if he's completely clueless? Maybe the reason you're single is because of some sin in your past. Oof. ... Make a list and pray every day over it. I did that in the 10th grade and nothing has changed. Don't date them unless you're sure you're going to marry them. But isn't the point of dating to figure out if they are someone you could wake up next to every day with terrible morning breath? Change churches if you're not meeting anyone, because finding a husband is the only reason I attend my church. Focus on your marriage to Jesus. He's your true husband. But Jesus doesn't cuddle. Focus on being a Proverbs 31 woman. What even is flax? And the list goes on.
They're beautiful, and I confess that I have said or thought most of those. They're pretty amazing. Thank you for writing that for me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I can look in the mirror and be ashamed and just realise I need to change. So what do you think would be helpful in the church in terms of how it deals with single people?
Yeah, I have a chapter for the church. I didn't hold back. In the most respectful of ways. The chapter for the church is really about, I think I should know, is really about this dialogue or the language that they use around, it's called the idol of marriage. That's right. It's about how much, for example, pastors use married analogies in their sermons. Or analogies about children, their kids, and it's wonderful. It's not like you don't want to hear about them, but they're not always relevant or helpful to a single person, particularly someone who might be divorced or widowed. It's not just the not yet married or not married people. Like, singleness is actually quite an array of people fall under that banner. So I talk a lot about just changing the dialogue around how we talk about marriage. One part I will share with you was just stuff like this. So it's called The Day I Found Out I Was a Terrorist. I came across this quote in my research for this book, and it just made me cry. The most devastating attack on marriage is coming today from singleness. Singleness is an assault on marriage. I just see singleness as a disaster. According to the author of this quote, pastor and teacher John MacArthur, who in 1996, would you believe, shared a blog about the blessings of singleness, my marital status makes me a terrorist. Apparently, I'm launching a full-scale attack on marriage through my relationship status. The idea that people like me are out to bring to ruin the very thing most of us desire is completely twisted logic. I'm not consciously remaining single in order to disassemble the institution of marriage. At this point in my journey, I'm consciously remaining single in order to prepare myself to enter into a strong, deeply loving marriage. And I have a right to hold out for the best because I want to be the most useful to God. Rushing in or settling just to get out of singleness is not God's best and has the potential to derail me from what He wants to achieve through me. I highly doubt that you would find one single person yet to marry, divorced, widowed, or otherwise who is remaining alone in order to attack marriage. So that's an example of and I think also in addition to that, I think it's even down, I'm not necessarily against this idea, but it's one of the ways. When someone gets engaged in your congregation, they ask them to stand. and everyone applauds. And I'm not saying that that's wrong or that they shouldn't. But when someone becomes recently single, so no one asks them to stand and we don't applaud them. And I'm not saying we should. But there just seems to be this like real praise of marriage and like so-and-so got married over the weekend or they're engaged or this. And there isn't the same kind of praise done in a really respectful and loving way of the status of singleness within the church.
So we need to buy a copy for our pastor. We need to buy a copy for our married friends. We need to buy a copy for our single friends to cheer them up. It's great that Christmas is coming. How can people get access to your book?
So it is available on my website, nerimorris.com. So you can buy it both in the print and ebook version on my website. You can also purchase it on your Kindle or Nook, Kobo, whatever your e-reader is. It should be available. It's on iTunes. It's on Amazon. If you're in the States, which I doubt any of you online would be on the States because it's like 3 a.m. in the morning there. You can get the print version in the States from Amazon. So yeah, it should be available from wherever you choose to purchase your books. Yeah.
And we talked about a special offer. Can you just reiterate that?
Yeah, so the special offer is a little discount I'd offered to my VIPs, but I wanted to extend it to everyone. So the discount code is VIP DISC, VIP DISC 2020.
VIP Disc 2020. Okay,
Yeah,
I think I got it.
I should have picked I should have just been like single 2020 or something, but you know, in that moment when I was pounding the keys making that code, VIP Disc 2020 was what came to mind.
VIP discount, we can move it.
Yeah, so that will be available for a little while, for the next like kind of couple of weeks if you want to purchase a copy via the website. It's only available on my website, so don't try and enter that code on Amazon because they will laugh at you. Yep.
Cool. Oh, we got some questions. Oh my gosh. Okay, I was just, I thought we'd been there, but wow, there's so many questions. We can be here till midnight.
Oh gosh, guys.
Thanks everyone for answering the call. This is awesome. So what was the hardest part to write, Neri?
I think the hardest part to write was the book itself. And I say that because I didn't have this like really clear, this is what I want to say, and I could see it kind of clearly. It was like, I think this, and I think that, and I think this, and here's a story that, like, why I think that, here's the story, so like, let's write that bit. And then I think this, and so let's write the story with that. And so it was this kind of, it was pieced together. It was, the book, this is nowhere near the same as the very first draft, my very first completed draft. But, I mean, that's part of the journey. So I think it was just kind of like trying to figure out I knew I had a lot to say, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. And so that was probably the hardest part, getting that concise.
Neri, concise. Yeah.
The first draft was 65,000 words. Yes. This is like 55 or something. So we chopped a fair bit out.
Do you think you would be an author now if you weren't single?
Ooh.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think I would be. I always wanted to write a book. I did start to write a book a few years ago and got like one chapter in and didn't finish it. So it would be something that I would want to do, but it might have taken a little longer for me to get to that point. Like it could have been, when I was in my 40s or something. When life settled down in my 40s and I decided I'd write.
Yes. I know that story. So we've asked about what was the surprising thing about writing, what was the hardest thing, but what was your favourite part of writing and the editing experience?
Oh, favourite part, I think my favourite part was actually getting the final manuscript. I printed it off, all 157 pages of it, and it was like this, I looked at it and I was like, this makes sense now, like, it's a thing and it makes sense, and I read it and I was like, yes, I make sense. This is good.
I remember that, you were so excited.
Yes, I was like, it's not going to be weird, and it's like logic to it. So, yeah.
I think you said to me, Cara, I'm not sure if I can admit this, but I think it's actually really good.
Yeah, I'll tell you one story. I printed off that 157-page manuscript and I sat down on my couch to do a final read through with a red pen to be like, where have I missed a full stop and stuff? And I read the first chapter, the first couple of pages of it, and I stopped and I cried. And I cried because I was like, it's actually good. Which sounds so up myself. But
No.
I was having a real moment of doubt whether or not this was actually anything I should be saying. Like, who am I to write a book about anything? I don't know anything. And I was just really in that headspace of doubting the whole thing. And I read it and I just cried for a little bit because I was like, it's actually good, God. Thank you. Get back to it. So, yeah.
It's awesome. We do know that you get most of the way through on bravado.
Yeah.
This was substance, mate. That's great. Now, someone's asked, you read out that story of that experience as a teenager. What would you tell that teenager now, looking back, do you think?
Oh, good question. I would probably not tell her too much because I would want her to learn what I now know, and I think she needs to learn those lessons.
Yeah.
But the one thing I would encourage her in is to let go of the expectation. So don't hold tight to this idea that life is going to unfold according to the playbook that I have been given in my younger years. That, you know, that is the narrative of the church, that you grow up in your early 20s, you should get married, you'll have kids, you'll find out your calling, and you'll live your calling for the rest of life, and that's it. That's your playbook. That's what life is going to be like. And so I would just encourage her to not hold so tightly to that playbook, but to learn at a younger age to embrace the mystery of God, the adventure of God, and that, and to really know that wherever He leads, like there's adventure in every direction, and it's worth going on it and worth figuring out why He's got you there. So don't hold so tightly to that. This is how it's going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is a sort of similar question. It's now we're moving to 23-year-old, but what would you say to a 23-year-old who's just starting to embrace singlehood yet feels tempted by being in a relationship?
Well, I think it would depend on the kind of relationship. Like that excerpt that I read out, I think is really important for us to pay attention to as single people. Like you're giving up a lot. When you truly learn to value singleness and embrace it and see it for the amazing thing that it is, no one should cut across that unless they're worthy to cut across that, unless they're worth the sacrifice. And so at 23, if you want to get into a relationship, just make sure the person's worth it. Like just make sure that it's gonna be worth the sacrifice. Because if there's someone that you're only kind of like interested in, or you kind of can't really see it going anywhere, and I'm not saying, when I say going anywhere, I don't mean like you can't see yourself walking down the aisle, because the point of dating is to date. Let's just get to know the person. But yeah, I think it's important that you think about what you're sacrificing for it. Yeah.
Here's a good question about faith. What have you found hardest in relationships you've had in relation to your faith? Has it helped or hindered?
The hardest thing about relationships and faith. I think that if you'd asked me back at any moment where I had just recently been dumped, I probably would say it's not been helpful. But I think that my faith has grown certainly through each experience. My faith has evolved because of those experiences, and I have a stronger faith because of those experiences. So, yeah, I hope I've answered the question, but I think that it's certainly grown and evolved because of them. So I don't resent those experiences. I would have liked to have not have experienced them and still arrived at the same conclusion, but because that's not possible, and I talk about this growth, is only possible through the breaking of something. Like if you think of a seed, like it can't become plants unless the seed cracks and breaks, and there's a tearing of something for it to then push through the soil. So it's got to push through that, and then when it hits the surface, it's got a whole nother world of like trials to face, and it's got to push through that, but each step makes it stronger, more beautiful, and more able to cope with what comes next. And so those relationships might have broken me, but my faith grew because of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. And the question that I'm sure many of us are just wondering, if you do start dating someone, is one of the first things you're going to do give them this book?
Yeah, I have joked about just being like, so if you want to read about my past here, read that, and then come and talk to me about wanting to date me, because this will tell you everything you need to know. I don't look. I've often wondered if this is actually going to hinder my dating game. When I'm like, yeah, I've written a book. What's it about? Singleness. Want to go on a date? I have wondered whether or not it's going to hinder, and I just have to trust Jesus that He knows what He's doing, and that whoever I date next will not be weirded out by the fact I've written a book on being single, but rather would find that inspiring or encouraging or whatever. So.
And if not, there's always singleness.
There's
Single
always,
Me Part 2.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Single Me Part 2. How to be single in your 40s.
Awesome. Would you like to say any last words to your audience, both in person and on Zoom or Facebook?
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming and dialing in and spending your Thursday night with me. I so appreciate the support that those of you who've purchased a book. Like every time I saw those emails come through, it just helped a little girl realize her dream. So I'm so grateful for the love, the support, the encouragement, all of it, and just being here tonight has meant the world to me. I'm sorry that we couldn't be in person. My next book launch, I'll have it in person. Y'all can come.
It will be spectacular. With your permission, I'd like to just say a couple of words in prayer for you and to commission this book. Is that okay?
I would love that. Thank you.
Please join me if you want. Dear Lord, thank you for the way that you have shaped Neri into this beautiful, confident, amazing, talented woman. Thank you that she can add another string to her bow. She is now author Neri Morris. Thank you that you have drawn out of her the words that are on this page, the pages of this book. We pray, Lord, for this book, that it would speak to hearts, that it would encourage spirits, that it would grow people, and that it would also challenge some of the unhelpful things we see happening within the church and in Christian circles. Lord, I pray that the words in this book would enable people to, as Neri said, embrace singleness and to grow closer to you, and to be able to be a witness to the fact that Christianity is good news for singles, with Jesus being the best single there is. So Lord, I pray that you will take this book, that you will take these words, and that you will use them to mould people and change structures, and make this world a better place that has more of the fragrance of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And bye. Bye.
Thanks, guys.